Well, howdy there, Internet students. Mr. Hermson again. Today we're going to talk about taking some real-life problems and learning what we know about linear equations and how you write them to help us work on these real-life problems. So in this first problem here, it says, while on vacation in Washington, D.C., the cab ride from Dulles Airport to the hotel is 15 miles. The total cost of the cab ride was $25.50. The cabbie charges $1.50 per mile for the entire trip. Okay, so we want to come up with an equation. To know that, to write the equation, we need to know what the slope is, and actually we already know that slope is rate, so it's $1.50 times however many miles we go. Maybe we don't want to use y and x here. Maybe we want cost equals $1.50 times the number of miles. But there's some fee that the cab charges so that they make something even if they only drive you a block. Now, that's what I'd like you to try and figure out. It says that when they went 15 miles, the total cost of the cab ride was $25.50. So in there is this $1.50 per mile plus something extra. See if you can figure out what that is. All right, if you weren't able to get that, here's what I'm thinking. You would take the $1.50 per mile times the 15 miles they drove to find the mileage cost of this $25.50. So that is $22.50. And then the extra amount, so the amount that you have to add on to make this $25.50 is the flat rate. And that would be $25.50 minus $22.50, which is $3. Okay, so there's a $3 flat charge. All right, so now we can finish up the equation, and go ahead, I'll let you figure out how much a 7-mile ride would cost. All right, if you did that right, you should have got $13.50. Okay. So one thing we can find out about that is the cost of riding in cab is not proportional. So if a 15-mile trip costs $25.50, that doesn't mean that a 7.5-mile trip would be half of that price, and that's because this is not a direct variation. Okay, let's try another problem. It says Marty is spending money at an average rate of $3 per day. After 14 days, he has $68 left. The amount left depends on the number of days that have passed. Write an equation. Okay, well, we know part of the equation already. We know the rate that he's spending. Now, since that's going, taking off from the total, you have to think of that as a negative. So, so you can start the amount that he has left, let's call that A, is going to equal -3 times the number of days he spends. We should probably use maybe a D for that, or N for number of days, something like that. Let's use a D for days. Plus, but now that's getting subtracted off of his original amount that he had, which would be this. Now we have to figure out what that is. Now the hint that we have is that there's $68 left after 14 days of spending $3 per day. So I'm going to leave that to you. Go ahead and figure that out. Okay, so if you spend $3 a day for 14 days, that's a total of $42. He used to have that amount before he spent it. Plus he has this 68 still, so he originally had $110. Now you could also write this equation this way, if you like. It might make more sense to you. $110, whoops, I wrote that wrong. $110 minus $3 times the number of days. That'd be another way to look at that. Okay, Now you can go ahead and figure out how much money he'll have left after 9 days. And again, this was not proportional, was it? And that's because this is not a direct variation. All right, you should have had that. Marty had $83 left after 9 days. All right, let's try one more problem. A caterer charges $120 to cater a party for 15, $200 for 25. Assume that the cost y is a linear function of the number of people. Sometimes I like to just set it up into a chart here. So x is how many people. So when there's 15 people, it costs you 120. And when there's 25 people, it costs you 200. Now, what we can do is see if this is a direct variation, because that would make the problem a lot easier. So to do that, we're going to do 120 divided by 15, which is 8, which means it's $8 per person. And 200 divided by 25 is also 8. So yeah, it is. It's a direct variation. That makes it really easy. There's nothing to add on to your equation. The cost is simply $8 times the number of people, which is x. So I'll let you finish it up and find the cost of 40 people, and then we'll do one more problem. And you should have got 320 for that. Okay, on this one, it says the bus company took a tour bus on the ferry when there were 30 people aboard. The ferry charged the bus company $180. The following week, the bus had 50 people on board, and the ferry charged $220. How much is the base rate? So I got a feeling there's some cost for the bus alone, and then there's a cost per person added to that, so we have to figure that out. So let's just set this up. We know that 30 people, the cost was $180. Now if you divide that, it seems like it's $6 per person. Let's see if that holds out. 50 people is $220. Well, 50 times 6 is 300, so if that doesn't hold out, so that means we're dealing with a linear but not a direct variation. So the first thing we want to do is find the slope or the rate per person. And to do that, what we're going to need to do is figure out how much more the cost was. Basically, we're going to use this formula. What it's going to tell us is the cost per person, the rate. Okay, and to do that, we need to subtract two y's, which are our costs. And then subtract the two x's to get the number of people. That cost is 4. So what we're finding out here is that the additional 40 people is costing the additional $40 cost is for 20 more people, which means that's $2 per person. Okay, so now we got the $2 per person part. And then we just have to figure out what the base rate is. Go ahead and pause here if you want to figure that out for yourself, which I think you probably do. You know that there's a $2 per person cost built into these. So there's going to be something else added on. So go ahead and figure. If you did that right, you figured that it was 120. So basically they're saying that an empty bus is going to cost you $120. And then plus $2 per person more. And the way I got that is I took these 30 people times 2 is $60. But my cost is actually $180, so I have to figure out what I have to add to that. And so I did 180 minus 60, which is 120, which is probably what you did also. All right, well, that's all I got for you here. And go ahead and try those couple of problems in your homework, see if you can get those right. And we'll talk to you soon.